Throughout history, nature's fury has shaped civilization in ways we're only beginning to understand. And sometimes, the clues are buried right beneath our feet. Imagine a storm so powerful it wiped entire cities off the map. A flood that forced civilizations to vanish. A hurricane that altered the balance of global power. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the wind roaring, the ground trembling beneath you, and the sea rising faster than you can run. The greatest forces shaping human history weren't always kings or conquerors. They were the unstoppable forces of nature. But these disasters didn't just bring destruction. They forced innovation, toppled empires, and reshaped the world in ways we still feel today. From lost cities swallowed by the sea to forgotten floods that changed the fate of nations, history's greatest storms left behind more than ruins. They left behind warnings. And as modern climate change fuels stronger hurricanes, rising sea levels, and extreme weather, these stories are more relevant now than ever. Welcome to Armchair Archaeology, where we uncover how history's most powerful storms, floods, and earthquakes didn't just destroy, they transformed the world in ways we're still uncovering today. And stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll learn how one disaster was so massive that it may have inspired one of the most haunting paintings in history. Before we start these incredible stories of nature's power, make sure to subscribe to Armchair Archaeology and hit the notification bell. We bring you the most fascinating discoveries from history every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Let's begin. In October 1780, as the American Revolution raged, an even greater force was about to reshape history. Not on the battlefield, but in the skies above the Caribbean. The Great Hurricane of 1780 remains the deadliest Atlantic hurricane on record, with winds so powerful they stripped the bark off trees and obliterated entire fleets. Some reports suggest gusts exceeded 200 miles per hour, making it likely a Category 5 storm, though no modern measurements exist. Over 20,000 people perished, a toll so devastating it permanently altered the balance of power in the region. But what if I told you that this storm didn't just change weather patterns, it changed the fate of nations? At the time, the Caribbean was a battleground in the global conflict between Britain, France, and Spain. The hurricane annihilated fleets on both sides, but France suffered the greatest losses. Hoping to weaken British control, the French had sent reinforcements to the Caribbean, only for the storm to sink their ships before they ever reached battle. With thousands of sailors and soldiers lost, France's naval power was severely weakened. Some historians argue that, had the hurricane not struck, France could have gained far more ground in the Caribbean, possibly altering the entire trajectory of colonial history. Beyond its impact on war, entire towns vanished, leaving nothing but silence in a matter of hours. In Barbados, every single building was damaged or destroyed, and in St. Lucia, the storm lifted cannons and hurled them hundreds of feet. Today, archaeologists have found shipwrecks from the storm scattered across the sea floor, preserving the final moments of vessels that never made it to port. In some settlements, layers of storm debris still mark the event, buried beneath modern streets. This hurricane is often overshadowed by military history, yet its impact was just as significant. It's a reminder that sometimes history's most powerful forces aren't armies or rulers, but the relentless fury of nature itself. While the Great Hurricane of 1780 reshaped colonial power, another storm, over a century later, would rewrite the future of an American city. On September 8, 1900, the booming port city of Galveston, Texas, was poised to become one of the most important trade hubs in the United States. But by nightfall, it lay in ruins, flattened by the deadliest natural disaster in American history. A monstrous hurricane, with estimated winds of 145 miles per hour, unleashed a storm surge that swallowed the island whole. Storm surges, the true killers in hurricanes, can rise 20 feet in minutes, turning streets into rivers and buildings into islands. Over 8,000 people perished, though some estimates place the toll at 12,000, making it the worst hurricane disaster in U.S. history. What makes this catastrophe even more tragic is that it could have been mitigated. Weather forecasting in the United States at the time was still primitive, but Cuban meteorologists had accurately predicted the storm's path. However, due to political tensions, American authorities dismissed their warnings and insisted the hurricane would veer harmlessly out to sea. This overconfidence left Galveston completely exposed to one of the worst storms ever recorded. The destruction was unfathomable, but the real shock came afterward. The aftermath was apocalyptic. Entire neighborhoods vanished, leaving no trace they had ever existed. The floodwaters were so high that bodies were found miles inland, washed into fields and bayous. The sheer scale of the tragedy forced Galveston to embark on one of the most ambitious engineering projects in history. Over the next several years, engineers literally lifted the entire city, some areas by as much as 17 feet, using millions of cubic yards of sand. They also constructed a massive seawall, which still stands today. Despite these efforts, Galveston never regained its status as a major port. Houston took its place as the region's dominant trade center. Today, beneath modern Galveston, archaeologists still uncover remnants of the old city. Storm-buried buildings, lost streets, and personal belongings frozen in time. It's a haunting reminder that disasters don't just change landscapes, they change the course of history. Speaking of history's most powerful forces, if you're fascinated by ancient civilizations and their mysteries, check out our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World. You'll find it linked in the pinned comment. In the summer of 1931, China faced one of the deadliest natural disasters in human history, a flood so vast that it drowned entire provinces, displaced millions, and reshaped the country's future. Known as the Yangtze River Flood of 1931, this catastrophe wasn't a single event, but a relentless onslaught of water caused by months of extreme rainfall, melting snow from the mountains, and an unusually high number of cyclones. By August, the Yangtze and its tributaries had overflowed their banks, submerging an area larger than England. Entire villages disappeared, and in cities like Wuhan and Nanjing, people navigated streets by boat for months. The human toll was staggering. Between 3, 7, and 4 million people died, either drowning in the flood itself or succumbing to famine and disease in the aftermath. It remains one of the deadliest disasters in recorded history, yet is often overshadowed in global narratives. The flood's impact went beyond immediate destruction. It exposed China's urgent need for modern flood control, prompting later governments to build massive levees and dams, including the Three Gorges Dam, one of the largest engineering projects in history. But its effects weren't just environmental, it had political consequences too. The ruling nationalist government's slow and ineffective response fueled unrest, strengthening support for the communist movement that would eventually take power in 1949. Today, archaeologists and geologists study the flood layers preserved in the Yangtze River basin, revealing centuries of catastrophic flooding events. In some areas, remnants of lost villages, buried homes, and ancient flood markers serve as stark reminders of nature's power. And with modern climate change increasing the risk of extreme floods, history forces us to ask, could an even greater catastrophe be on the horizon? If you're enjoying this deep dive into history, consider supporting the channel with a super thanks. Your support helps us continue uncovering the forgotten stories of the past. But not all disasters come from the sea. Sometimes destruction rises from beneath our feet. On the morning of November 1755, Lisbon, the capital of Portugal's vast maritime empire, was alive with worshippers celebrating All Saints' Day. Without warning, the ground began to shake violently. Within minutes, one of the most powerful earthquakes in European history, estimated between 8.5 and 9.0 in magnitude, reduced much of the city to rubble. And that was just the beginning. As survivors fled into the open squares, a massive tsunami surged up the Tagus River, swallowing entire districts and dragging thousands out to sea. Those who sought shelter in churches and homes were trapped as fires broke out across the city, burning for nearly a week. When it was over, an estimated 60,000 people were dead, and Lisbon, once one of Europe's wealthiest cities, had become an apocalyptic wasteland. The impact of the disaster wasn't just physical, it was intellectual. At the time, many believed earthquakes were divine punishment, but the Lisbon catastrophe shook Europe's faith in that idea. Philosophers like Voltaire openly questioned how a supposedly just God could allow such devastation, a theme he explored in Candide. The earthquake helped usher in the modern age of disaster science, leading to the first systematic studies of seismic activity and urban planning measures aimed at reducing future destruction. Today, archaeologists still uncover ruins from the disaster buried beneath modern Lisbon. Parts of the city's famed Praça do Comércio sit atop earthquake rubble, a silent reminder of the destruction below. The disaster didn't just reshape a city, it helped redefine how humanity understands and prepares for the forces of nature. And with modern cities still vulnerable to powerful earthquakes, its lessons are more important than ever. Just as earthquakes can swallow cities, some disasters explode with fury, like the volcanic eruption that changed the world's skies. On August 27, 1883, the volcanic island of Krakatoa, nestled between Java and Sumatra, erupted with such unimaginable force that it changed the world. The final explosion was so powerful that most of the island was obliterated, vanishing into the sea. The sound of the blast was heard over 3,000 miles away, equivalent to an explosion in New York being heard in London. This wasn't just loud, it was one of the most powerful atmospheric events ever recorded, sending pressure waves around the globe multiple times. The pressure waves circled the Earth 3 times, and ships as far away as South Africa reported seeing ash darken the sky. The destruction didn't stop there. The eruption triggered tsunamis over 120 feet high, swallowing entire villages along the coasts of Java and Sumatra. An estimated 36,000 people perished, either from the waves, falling debris, or suffocating clouds of ash. In the days that followed, a strange haze settled over the planet, dimming the sun and lowering global temperatures. Krakatoa left a hidden mark beneath the sea as well. Archaeologists and geologists have discovered entire villages buried under layers of volcanic debris, frozen in time like a tropical Pompeii. Shipwrecks from the disaster still rest on the ocean floor, providing a haunting glimpse into the event's destructive power. But perhaps the most unexpected consequence of Krakatoa wasn't just in the land it buried, it was in the skies above. In the months that followed, something eerie appeared across the world. But more on that later. Beneath the ocean's surface, where Krakatoa once stood, a new volcano is already rising. Named Anak Krakatau, child of Krakatoa, it has been steadily growing from the sea floor, proving that even after the most violent destruction, the Earth is never truly finished reshaping itself. What do you think? Could the eruption of Krakatoa have had an even greater impact than we realize? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how natural disasters shape civilizations. On March 11, 2011 at 2:46 p.m. local time, the ocean off Japan's northeastern coast began to tremble. Within minutes, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake, one of the most powerful ever recorded, sent shockwaves across the Pacific. But the real catastrophe arrived 42 minutes later, when a 130-foot tsunami surged onto the coast, swallowing entire towns and sweeping inland for miles. More than 18,000 people lost their lives, and the disaster triggered the Fukushima nuclear meltdown, one of the worst nuclear accidents in history. The tsunami's force was so immense that it shifted Earth's axis by several inches and permanently altered the country's coastline. Satellites even detected that Japan had moved eastward by up to 8 feet. But perhaps even more astonishing is that this disaster had been predicted centuries earlier. Scattered along Japan's coastline are mysterious tsunami stones, some standing for over 600 years. These stone markers, carved by past survivors, warn future generations not to build homes below certain elevations. One such stone in the village of Anayoshi reads, "Do not build your homes below this point." Unlike many modern towns, Anayoshi listened and survived. The 2011 tsunami left behind more than destruction. It renewed interest in studying past disasters for future survival. Archaeologists and geologists now examine ancient tsunami deposits and historical records to trace patterns of past megaquakes, hoping to predict when the next big one will strike. With rising sea levels and intensifying storms caused by climate change, coastal communities around the world face a growing threat. The warnings of history are all around us. The question is, will we pay attention? When we think of ancient cities, we picture grand temples and thriving marketplaces, but many of them were shaped or even erased by the forces of nature. From floods to earthquakes, history shows that where humans built, nature often had other plans. One striking example is Mahendraparvata, an early Khmer city in Cambodia. For centuries, it flourished. But recent research suggests that monsoon floods and water mismanagement contributed to its downfall. Archaeologists using LiDAR scanning technology have uncovered ancient canals clogged with sediment, evidence that extreme weather may have overwhelmed the city's infrastructure. Once a thriving metropolis, it was abandoned and reclaimed by the jungle. In Mesopotamia, some of the world's oldest flood myths, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, describe a cataclysmic deluge. In modern Iraq, archaeologists have uncovered layers of ancient flood deposits showing that massive floods periodically devastated early cities like Ur. These findings suggest that some flood myths were likely inspired by real events, passed down through generations as warnings. In some cases, these floods forced cities to relocate or rebuild, but in others, they spelled the end of entire settlements. Then there's Heraklion, an Egyptian port city once thought to be a legend, until divers found its ruins submerged beneath the Mediterranean. Geological evidence suggests that a combination of rising seas, earthquakes, and storm surges slowly dragged the city underwater. Statues, temples, and entire streets have been recovered from the seabed, offering a glimpse into a lost world. Some civilizations adapted to these threats, developing advanced flood defenses and earthquake-resistant structures. Others, like Mahendraparvata and Heraklion, were simply wiped off the map. As modern sea levels rise and storms grow more powerful, are today's cities facing the same fate? Many civilizations have been shaped or erased by natural disasters. If you want to dive deeper into ancient mysteries, check out Secrets of the Ancient World. It's packed with fascinating discoveries about lost cities, forgotten technologies, and unsolved mysteries. Grab your copy in the pinned comment. For most of history, storms, earthquakes, and floods seemed like random acts of destruction. punishments from the gods, or omens of doom. But ancient civilizations were not as powerless as we might think. By carefully observing the world around them, they developed early warning systems, protective structures, and myths that carried vital survival knowledge. One of the earliest examples of weather prediction comes from the Babylonians, who meticulously recorded cloud patterns and seasonal changes on clay tablets over 3,000 years ago. Their observations weren't perfect, but they laid the foundation for modern meteorology. The Maya, too, closely monitored the skies. By tracking long-term weather cycles, they learned to anticipate droughts, although even their advanced knowledge couldn't save them from the mega-droughts that led to their civilization's decline. Ancient Japan took a different approach. Learning from disaster itself, generations of survivors carved warnings into tsunami stones, telling future inhabitants where to build safely. Some of these stones, centuries old, correctly marked the safe zones above the reach of even the most devastating waves. In contrast, modern towns that ignored these warnings were completely wiped out by the 2011 Tohoku tsunami. Even ancient structures reveal clues about disaster preparedness. The Incas, living in an earthquake-prone region, built their cities using precisely cut, interlocking stones that could shift without collapsing when the earth trembled. Meanwhile, in ancient Rome, engineers constructed massive drainage systems like the Cloaca Maxima, still in use today, to prevent flooding in a city that regularly faced rising waters. Today, scientists use climate models and historical data to predict extreme weather events, but many of their warnings are ignored, just as ancient tsunami stones were. As climate change fuels stronger hurricanes, rising seas, and unpredictable weather, the wisdom of the past may be the key to surviving the storms of the future. Throughout history, natural disasters have tested humanity's resilience. But time and again, these catastrophes have also shown our greatest strength: the ability to rebuild, adapt, and support one another. Some of the world's most devastating storms and earthquakes have left behind more than destruction. They've reshaped societies, sparked new traditions, and forged stronger communities. One of the most striking examples comes from the Netherlands. After the catastrophic North Sea flood of 1953, which killed over 2,500 people, the Dutch launched one of the largest engineering projects in history, the Delta Works. This system of dams, floodgates, and barriers wasn't just a technological achievement. It represented a national commitment to never let such a disaster happen again. To this day, the Dutch are world leaders in flood prevention, all because of a single storm that forced them to innovate. But resilience isn't just about technology, it's about people. After Hurricane Katrina struck New Orleans in 2005, displacing over 1 million people, communities both local and global came together to help. Volunteers rebuilt homes, musicians preserved the city's cultural heritage, and in the aftermath, New Orleans saw a renaissance of local activism aimed at protecting vulnerable neighborhoods from future storms. Ancient history tells similar stories. After the 1755 Lisbon earthquake, survivors gathered in makeshift camps, forming one of the first organized disaster relief efforts in European history. In Japan, after the 2011 Tohoku tsunami, an outpouring of community aid and international support helped rebuild entire towns, though many also reflected on the wisdom of their ancestors, whose tsunami stones had warned of the danger long before modern science could. Disasters often leave behind scars, but they also leave behind lessons, innovations, and communities that emerge stronger than before. In the end, storms don't just destroy, they remind us what truly holds civilizations together. History is full of secrets waiting to be uncovered. get secrets of the ancient world today and dive even deeper into the mysteries of the past. History has shown us that storms, earthquakes, and floods aren't just relics of the past. They're warnings for the future. The disasters that shaped ancient cities, changed the course of empires, and forced entire civilizations to adapt are happening more frequently than ever before. But the question is, are we listening? One of the clearest patterns throughout history is that when civilizations ignore the forces of nature, they suffer the consequences. The Maya, once masters of water management, declined after a series of devastating droughts they could no longer control. The Minoans, one of the most advanced cultures of the Bronze Age, may have been permanently weakened by a cataclysmic volcanic eruption. Even in modern times, cities like New Orleans, Jakarta, and Miami face growing threats from rising seas and stronger storms, threats that history warns us cannot be ignored. But history also offers hope. Some civilizations fell victim to disasters, while others adapted and thrived. The Dutch turned a deadly flood into a model of engineering excellence. The Japanese, who have faced countless tsunamis, continue to refine early warning systems and earthquake-resistant architecture. Even in ancient times, civilizations found ways to adapt, whether by moving to higher ground, reinforcing buildings, or developing new survival strategies. Experts say storms are getting stronger, wetter, and deadlier. But why? And what can we do about it? Rising global temperatures fuel stronger storms, heavier rainfall, and more devastating floods. But if history has taught us anything, it's that humanity is at its best when it learns from the past. The ruins of lost cities and the scars left by ancient disasters aren't just stories, they're lessons in survival. Time and again, history leaves us clues, some buried in ruins, others written in legends. But are we paying attention? The forces of nature will never stop shaping our world, but whether they destroy or inspire us to build stronger, smarter, and more resilient societies, that choice is ours. If history has shown us one thing, it's that storms, earthquakes, and floods don't just destroy, they reshape civilizations. Some have wiped cities off the map, while others have forced societies to adapt, innovate, and rebuild stronger than before. The question is, will we learn from the past, or will we make the same mistakes? Ancient flood myths, buried ruins, and tsunami stones, these are all warnings left behind by those who came before us. But disasters don't just leave destruction in their wake. Sometimes their effects are so far-reaching, so unexpected, that they shape not just history, but culture itself. Take the Krakatoa Eruption of 1883. It was one of the most powerful volcanic explosions in recorded history. But its impact didn't end with the destruction of villages and towering tsunamis. In the years that followed, something eerie happened. The skies across the world turned a deep blood red at sunset. Artists in Europe and America captured these ghostly skies in their paintings, and many believe that one of the most famous artworks in history, Edvard Munch's The Scream, was inspired by Krakatoa's haunting after effects. A disaster so powerful it may have changed the way we see the world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the storms that shaped civilization. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Armchair Archaeology. What other disasters or lost civilizations should we explore next? Let us know in the comments. Until next time, keep digging, keep questioning, and never stop uncovering the past.